Got it. Okay.
Nice complex. I saw that they were doing some work on the credit union there. I noticed last week about maybe somebody new coming in or building. Parking lot on that side. Yeah.
We got a bunch of, we had to put together a bunch of, we just had done something, Asper did a, what we could do is swap out some new Asper stuff.
But speaking of that, I want to thank Fred Cartier, who's always here to get us on film. He volunteers his time for us, so we all owe him a big thank you. Thank you for coming out to the beautiful Taconic Retreat and Conference Center. This is our third time being out here. We keep changing the time of the year so that you get a different feeling for when we're doing, and because it's so warm and it's summertime, the windows are the blinds are closed. So we'll come back in the fall and the spring when the windows are open. It's really beautiful. But thank you to Veronica Tumbarella, who helped organize everything. She's standing in the back there. I just wanted to take a moment to introduce my intern this year, Miss Karen Kirker, who's right over here. She just finished her freshman year at Siena College, and she was our scholarship recipient last year. So I'm thrilled to have her helping me out in the office this summer. Tomorrow, we have a ribbon cutting at Evoke Style. It's a new clothing and shoe store in town. It's where Gallery Lodo used to be, so it's between Workers and Dreamers and Huck Hill's office. So that's tomorrow at 4. She has lots of nice things planned, great refreshments and some prizes. We also, the July Business After Hours is going to be at the newly renovated Rhinebeck Kitchen and Bath that was formerly Country Cupboards. Bill and his crew, I don't know if did everybody get to the Country Living Fair, I hope? Show of hands, anybody? That went, it was amazing. I think they're coming back next year, so I really, really recommend getting there. People were thrilled. They were from all over the country. We handed out 500 of our membership directory and visitors guides to people that are coming back for sure. A lot of the vendors were like, we're going to come a week early, stay a week later, bring our families. People were absolutely captivated by the area. So it was wonderful, and I think it will be even bigger and better next year, so please don't miss it next year. But anyway, I got to that because Bill Schaefer and his crew did the kitchen stage, and then they set up 5 other kitchens in the horticulture building, so they had a great showing, and they did a really, really beautiful job. They have some really beautiful things. And then hopefully all of you got to take a look at our young entrepreneurs' business ideas out in the lobby. I was so proud of them. We were supposed to do their trade show at the Business After Hours in the courtyard, which we got rained out of. So I'm sorry that a lot of them were not here, but we do have one representing them. I'm very proud of my daughter, Maeve. Raise your hand. So please, if you haven't taken a look at them before you go, they put a lot of time and effort in. They worked the whole school year. Many of you got to come in and meet them and talk with them and tell your stories. And I think everybody walked away pretty impressed with this group. We had from 7th graders to a senior and every grade in between. And it was a really, really wonderful experience. I wanted to thank some of our sponsors who are here. So Barbara Markell is representing John Ullman and Associates. They were a sponsor. And Kathy Ferrucci and Hudson Valley Federal Credit Union, thank you so much, both of you. Without your support, it wouldn't have happened this year. So I really thank you. It was a wonderful, wonderful thing, and we'll be doing it again next year. So I think really we have a lot to get to. So I just at this time want to ask, excuse me, my friend Kim Gomez to come on up.
I just want to thank my girl, Colleen. Colleen is generous enough to do all the work for arranging this and just let me come on board and bring my chamber with me. So I really want to thank her so much for everything she does. She is an amazing woman and a good friend. And by the way, also going to be playing soccer with me this summer in a tournament that we're doing for breast cancer called Goals for Hope. And last year, Colleen, I had actually done it many years ago, and Colleen did it last year and was black and blue from like here to there. So anticipate that both of the chamber executives are going to be really banged up in the month of August, and you know, it's no reflection on the chambers. So anyway, I just wanted to mention and thank Colleen so much. I'd like to thank my two board members that came out today, Ed Pruitt, our Director of Business Development, and Sean Jones, our second VP. Sorry, Sean, I forgot where did he disappear to? He's not even right there. He is. Thank them both for coming out today. And on top of that, Colleen actually wrote my script today, so this is really well taken care of. And I just wanted to mention we have a mixer, a couple of things. We have a sculptural exposition that we just opened last weekend. It's an exterior exposition. You're going to hear a little bit more about that from Carrie Fewer. But it's up in the village of Red Hook right now, and we would encourage everybody to just take a walk at your leisure sometime between now and mid-November. You can take the tour, you can pick up the maps at both the Red Hook Can Gallery, which is right near Village Pizza, or our chamber kiosk, and actually we're going to be providing them in the Rhinebeck kiosk as well. So you can take that tour. It's a really neat thing. It's the first time that we've done anything like this, so we're pretty excited about it. And take a look at all the new things that are going on in Red Hook. And we have a mixer on the 29th of August that's going to be happening at Richard Lyle's Gallery, which is in the center of Red Hook also, in the village. That's going to be 5 to 7. And that's it for right now. The summer's going to be a little quiet. I'm leaving for vacation in a few hours, so I'm pretty much out the door right now. But thank you once again, please, for having us here today, and that's it.
Good morning. I'm Sean Kemp. I'm the president of the new president of the Rhinebeck Chamber of Commerce. It's not a problem. Easily forgettable. Thank you all for coming today. I want to thank our board members as well. I know our new board member Janet Trupiano's here, Vicki Hack's here, Kyle's here, Tom Jasewicz is here. If there's anyone that I missed, please raise your hand. But I do thank the board of the Rhinebeck Chamber of Commerce coming out to today's breakfast. I also would like to thank our sponsor, Ed Mercier from Wells Fargo Advisors. Ed, if you'd like to come up for a moment and say a couple of words.
Want to give me the mic? That's the work for me to do.
Yeah.
I'll spare you. Let's get to the speaker.
You paid for it, so you got it.
All right. I'll just say, you're good. If you're here, you're not retired. We can help you with that.
All right. I'd also like to introduce Michelle Barson, Membership Relations Manager for the Business Council of New York State. And she's here today with Mr. Lev Ginsburg, Director of Government Affairs, with the Business Council's advocacy on health care and insurance, workers' compensation, and unemployment insurance issues. Mr. Ginsburg has a lot to cover today, so I won't bore you with too many details about his past, but he's a very accomplished individual. He's an attorney, graduate from Benjamin N. Cardozo School of Law. Worked with T-Mobile doing leasing issues. He was also affiliated with Senator, late Senator Arlen Specter. And now he's most recently served as staff attorney and supervisor with the former governor's office of regulatory reform. He handled stakeholder outreach and regulatory oversight over numerous state regulatory agencies, and his regulatory oversight work covered a broad range of issues, areas, and with a focus on health and labor regulations. And today he's here to talk about the Affordable Care Act and New York's healthcare exchanges, which I believe we should all be interested in because, correct me if I'm wrong, I think October is kind of a pretty big deadline that's on the horizon. So please welcome Mr. Ginsburg.
Good morning, everyone, and I forgot my glasses.
Before lunch starts, I'm
I
gonna
can
pass.
see you fine.
I'm gonna pass this around. Put your business card in it, and I will send you the presentation afterward. And then people ask for it, so it's a little easier way to get it.
My glasses are so dirty I can't really see anybody with them on. Anyway, so if you do have questions, raise your hand, and I'll notice the hands. Blobs, and they do this, and then we're good. Thanks for the introduction, and thanks for having me here today. I hope everyone can hear me. I came today to talk about, namely the ACA, the Affordable Care Act, otherwise known as Obamacare, and sort of how it interplays with small businesses and even large businesses. Usually I start out to sort of understanding the crowd. I got in trouble a couple of weeks ago because a lot of times I focus on small business. And I was in a room, there was about 100 people there, and I asked how many people work in a business with, under 50 employees, and one hand went up. And I said over 50, and then the rest of the hands went up, and I said, well, my slideshow is useless, so let's just take questions. So just raising a hand, how many people are in small businesses, which would be those with under 50 employees? All right, good, we're golden. So those of you that your hands aren't up, sorry. We'll discuss that too. But, and I apologize, I'm gonna go to a pretty quick clip because I've got to get out of here. I'm going to make myself really important sounding. I have a 10:30 meeting at the governor's office, so, it's kind of big deal. Got to get out the door. I'm meeting with, the 9th level down, of course, in the governor's office, so don't get too impressed. So the Business Council, and Michelle will, she's already done that for me. Thank you. So the Business Council, some people think of us as sort of the state chamber of commerce. You're all obviously very familiar with your local chambers. You deal with all sorts of local issues. One of the things that I think is really important for people to understand is that so much of what drives the issues surrounding your businesses are driven on a state level and sometimes, frankly, a federal level. So what we do is we represent about 2,600 member businesses around the state. Hopefully some of you, if you're not members now, will think about joining, and then we can have that many more members. And we represent business interests in front of the state government. So that includes both the legislature, which just, we can go to the next slide, I think, which we kind of get into what we do. We represent in front of the legislature, which actually the session just ended this last week. It's always a good time when session ends. It was like 4 a.m. Thursday night, 6:45 a.m. Saturday morning is when the Senate finally went out. But we spend, the better part of those 6 months advocating in front of the legislature for business. And then what we also do that a lot of other organizations sort of lack is we spend a lot of time advocating in front of regulatory agencies. And that's probably something that a lot of you have actually had to deal with on one level or another. In my bio, it says that I worked for the Governor's Office of Reg Reform, and I had the pleasure and sometimes displeasure of working for 4 governors in that capacity. And what we did is reviewed all the regulations that were proposed by almost every state agency and made sure that they weren't overbearing and overburdensome on business. We weren't always successful, I would like to add. I mean, we were overridden by the governor's office at large for political reasons on a regular basis. But there is a huge amount of regulatory oversight in the state of New York. It's probably your greatest burden, and that's really where the Business Council really shines, is that we have the ability to really get into the agencies and do some work. So today, for instance, I have a meeting about an issue that is, without getting into the details, it stems from a Department of Health guideline change in a letter that they sent to the laboratories that do vermiculite and asbestos testing for the state. So This is something that has no public review, that has really the public knows nothing about, but has a tremendous amount of impact on anyone who's doing construction, on anyone who has liability issues. Because what it ultimately does is it says that if you have vermiculite, I'm getting really boring, I know, but if you have vermiculite over 10% a product with over 10% vermiculite, it's a presumed asbestos-containing product, which means you then have to do asbestos abatement. So today we have a group of businesses coming in to meet with the Department of Health, the Department of Labor, and the Department of Environmental Conservation and the Governor's Office, because that's how many agencies are involved in this one little issue that will ultimately cost businesses multiple millions of dollars. Those are the kinds of things that the Business Council does on a daily basis, and why I don't sleep that much. But we're here to talk about Obamacare, and this is like one of my favorite cartoons. I've been using it, I've been overusing it, and frankly I have no right to use it. I stole it. Don't tell anyone. The beginning is near. So I've been using this cartoon for about 6 months, but the beginning is now really, really near. Because as was mentioned before, open enrollment into the exchanges begins in October 1st, which means we need to really have the ball rolling. So what we do, and I apologize once again, if I'm speaking too fast, just tell me to slow down, and if you want to interrupt me with a question, by all means. But so when I go out and I speak to businesses, you know, there's so much turmoil in our economy, and we have this, I mean, the economy is improving, but it's improving in a way that's we've called this what, the jobless recovery, and a soft recovery, and growth has been really underwhelming actually all this time, and businesses are already stressed. Small businesses especially are already stressed, and I'm getting my water. So, you know, we're in this environment where businesses are already sort of looking at their bottom lines and sort of starting to get pretty concerned about things. And then they hear on the horizon is this huge, huge change that's coming in October and then ultimately January. So, you know, people are freaking out, to be honest with you. I mean, people are really panic-stricken. They don't know what this means for them. So one of the things I try to tell businesses is, like, take the emotion out of this whole thing. Just forget about the emotion for a moment. And you know, try to act strategically. Try to think of this, you know, it's just another business decision. It's not the end of the world necessarily. It is the end of the world for some, but not for most. So I think that ultimately, and those people are not in this room, but it's a difficult time, but it's one that if you pay some attention, it could actually benefit some smaller businesses. I'm not going to, you know, own up to that statement if somebody, you know, holds me to it later. But I think that for some small businesses, this could be an easier way for you to ultimately get insurance. So I could kind of get into the details of the ACA right now. Here we are. Michelle's way ahead of me. Affordable insurance options. So the ACA was designed and was sold to us as the Affordable Care Act. So what it really does, or what it was meant to do, is expand coverage for those that did not have insurance in the country. And it was supposed to make it more of an even playing field when it came to small businesses versus large. You all know that a small business, your options of purchasing health insurance were small compared to those of large businesses. It's also a different insurance product. I mean, or a number of different insurance products. It's also rated differently, if you're familiar with the concept of community rating. So, you know, this was supposed to sort of give small businesses the opportunity to purchase insurance on a more even playing field. See, the one issue with the Affordable Care Act, and if we go to the next slide, it's called the Affordable Care Act, but there was never any part of this that had anything to do with making health care itself affordable. It has to do with making health insurance affordable. There's a huge disconnect between those two things, and that's something that I like people to take away from here. You know, each and every one of you, you know, have either for yourselves or for your employees, you have health insurance, hopefully you have health insurance, and you pay premiums that are probably significant and probably go up every year, possibly even in the double digits. But that, like all insurance products, are sort of a reflection of the loss cost on the other side. In other words, the insurance companies have to make a profit. That profit, as you all know probably, are limited in the state of New York, depending on your product, to 15 or 12% of your total premium. The rest has to actually go to medical dollars. So every time that there's an uptick in medical care costs or health care costs, your premium is going to rise. They're based on each other. So it's not so much the concentration of how much does health insurance cost? It's a question of how much does health care cost? And Obamacare has done absolutely nothing to control that. And if I got to put a pitch in for sort of future things to think about, we've done a huge revamp of health insurance in the country, and we're working on it pretty hard in the state of New York. But nowhere along the way has anyone talked about tort reform, which is something to keep in mind. Trial attorneys, I apologize. I know you do the other side, but I mean, tort reform is probably where I would have begun this conversation if we were going to control healthcare costs. It's just not part of this conversation. It's something to take away from today when you're speaking to representatives, when you're lobbying, when you're doing, issues. It's something to really consider, because it is probably the leading cost driver in healthcare. The need for excess tests, the need to pay for malpractice insurance, and things like that. But I didn't come here to talk about that today. We can go to that slide. Awesome. So New York's creating their own exchanges. So under the federal law, every state has to come up with exchanges, and it's really two exchanges. There's a private exchange, and then there's a small business exchange known as the shop. I bit my tongue while I was eating the bagel, and it's a little bit bleeding right now, so I'm lisping, and I'm sorry for that. It's a great morning. Yeah. So in any event, the states actually had an opportunity to do one of two things. You could sort of buy into the federal government's creation of a plan, or you could do your own. New York chose to do their own, and the Business Council was pretty supportive of that idea. The thinking was, we sort of know the state government. It's the devil that you know rather than the devil that you don't know. And our market is somewhat different than the federal government. And to be honest with you, it sort of works out for the best, because the federal government is so behind the eight ball in this development that they've actually had to delay some of the 2014 implementations for choice under their shop exchange that New York is not going to have to delay, because ours is actually that much further ahead than the federal government. So in any event, about 2 years ago, or about a year and a half ago, in anticipation of the creation of the exchange, New York had the Urban Institute do a couple of studies that are sort of determinative of what to expect out of the exchange. So this is the state, mind you, not the federal, not on the entire countrywide level. But we're expected to gain about 1 million extra people being insured in the state of New York. About 615,000 of those people will be on the individual exchange, and 450,000 anticipated to be on the shop. So those numbers are probably pretty sound. Some of the changes that might affect some of the people in the room are sole proprietors, for instance. I don't know how many people are sole proprietors, but I assume there's a few. Sole proprietors under New York state law that was signed by Pataki back in, I believe it was 96, allowed for sole proprietors to actually purchase small group health insurance as opposed to individual health insurance. They're no longer going to be purchasing small group health insurance as a group of one. They will now be on the individual exchange buying as individuals. So the shop exchange does not apply to sole proprietors. Sole proprietors will be moving to the individual exchange. The shop exchange will apply to those businesses that have employees of 2 to essentially 50. I hope I didn't just confuse the matter, just sole proprietors, individual exchange. Where there starts to be a little bit of contention in some of these numbers is that they determined that they'll lower premiums by 60% for individuals and 20% for small businesses. Now, it's not that amazing of a shot to think that perhaps individuals actually will get a very, very significant premium decrease. And the reason is that currently the individual market in the state of New York for individual insurance products is about 23,000 people who are purchasing it, between 23 and 25 depending on sort of the month. You are expanding a market of 25,000 people to 615,000. So the product price is going to drop incredibly significantly. There's no question about it. The issue is with the small businesses, the 20% drop in premium for small businesses. It's a number that I find beyond completely unachievable. Not only do I not believe that number, but I don't believe that there's going to be a savings. I mean, I actually think that there's going to be an increase. Now, of course, in an individual basis, you might find a product that's cheaper, but I think overall, when you look at the state, there's too many cost drivers built into the system to allow for for these numbers to come true. That being said, when the state of New York publishes numbers and says these are the markers, I start to worry about that they're going to want to reach the marks that they set for themselves. And going into the future, are we looking at manipulation of markets? It is a concern of mine, and it's something that we'll continue to look at. So about 3/4 of the people who will be on these exchanges, it's okay, you can go to that one. 3/4 of the people who will be on the exchanges are going to be eligible for one subsidy or another. So that really gets to the heart of the ACA. Frankly, it gets to the heart of most insurance matters and health costs, because what it really is about is a cost shift. It's a burden shift. It's a socialization of cost. And I don't mean socialization in the Karl Marx and Engels kind of way. I mean socialization in just really spreading it across. So when you look at the ACA, I think personally that it is probably one of the greatest wealth shifts from the young to the old that we've ever done in this country, much more so than even Social Security, because we're essentially mandating people to buy insurance that may or may not need it. Young people who don't go to the doctor, young people who don't necessarily. When I was young, I had a catastrophic plan that was, I mean, it covered next to nothing, but I never went to the doctor. It was irrelevant. But today I'm going to be mandated to buy a plan as a young person. And the reason is because you have to broaden the risk pool to allow for all of the other people to come into that risk pool who are old, using more resources. And the same thing sort of goes to cost. We're going to be subsidizing people on the individual exchange. We're going to be subsidizing actually some small businesses with certain tax cuts. But, that money has to come from somewhere. It doesn't just appear. So who's going to ultimately pay it? Well, it's the general payor in the state of New York. It's the general payor across the country. And that's typically employers who pick up the bulk of that cost. So, that's really where our concern comes in. So we start to look at the estimates versus realities. And, wow, I really am low on time. So basically, in a nutshell, I'm going to really start nutshelling this, but in a nutshell, how do we do this? We accomplish this through a whole bunch of new taxes. So the ACA, and I didn't list them all, but it has something called the HIT tax, the health insurance tax. I don't know if anyone has even anyone heard of it? Health insurance tax? Okay, the health insurance tax is a very interesting and bizarre tax. Most taxes, you set a tax rate, 8%, 10%, whatever. Whatever the income is, you tax it at 10%. You have what you have in your coffers. You make your budget. This basically said, okay, we're going to need $8 billion in year one to do the subsidies. So what we're going to do is we're going to tax health insurance providers on a per capita basis for all of their insured lives. It comes to about $400 per person, per premium. It's about a 2% policy increase in the state of New York per policy. And what it really does is it takes every single insurance company in the country, divides them by the number of people they have insured, and then that's the amount you pay. So here's something that's pretty interesting. Large companies, like the names that we all know, Fortune 500 companies, they don't buy health insurance from companies. They self-insure. They're not part of this tax structure. They don't pay this tax. So this totally disproportionately affects those of you that buy health insurance. And quite frankly, there's a bunch of companies that are sort of on the cusp of talking about going to self-insurance because of so many of these changes. And it's becoming a viable option for some, as long as you have enough money to reserve around it. But each company that sort of drops out of purchasing insurance is one less company that's going to have to be paying per capita of this tax. Less people in this pool, the higher that tax is per capita. So this is really a tax on small business. At the end of the day, I know we're actually taxing health insurance companies, but once I said they have to make a profit, they're limited in what their profit can be. This is going into your premium. End of story. Transitional reinsurance taxes. This is actually on those self-insured companies. It's $63. You can see it's a varying amount each year. The thing I didn't mention about the HIT taxes, that's also varying each year. Starts here, and in 2014 it will be $14.3 billion. So that $400 per individual will go up. What is that? That's like like 70%. So that'll go up even more. So you can expect that will be built into your premiums for the next several years under this. So you can see some of my concerns about saying that we're going to have a 20% reduction. Other ACA taxes is the next slide, Michelle. Thanks. So the comparative effective tax, these are not that exciting. They're $1 per member, $2 per member as they go up next year. But there is no ceiling on these. So we don't know where they're going to go. I don't anticipate that they're going to be unbelievably huge, but it's just that much more tacked on. They could go to $10, $12, etc. And then the Cadillac tax plan, which the Cadillac health plan tax that actually makes headlines. People talk about that one for one reason or another. That doesn't start until 2018. I actually think that story is not yet written, or at least finished, because a lot of the unions actually supply those Cadillac plans, and I have a very strong suspicion that they have a very strong lobby with this administration in Washington. So I think that you may actually see a change or perhaps a carve out for the unions. I wouldn't be shocked to see that either, which would be delightful. So all of this, frankly, in the state of New York is on top of what we already pay in health insurance taxes. So this is all, once again, built into your premiums. And if you go through these numbers, I mean, they're amazing. $3 billion, $1 billion for the covered live assessment, $331 million just to run the insurance department, which is now the financial services department, commercial insurance premium tax, HMO premium tax. It's $5 billion worth of taxes. That's just state of New York taxes. Now, a lot of those taxes, the $3.016 billion, were supposed to pay for indigent health services for, poor people who go to hospitals who don't have coverage. So one would think, okay, here we go. We're in Obamacare. Everybody's going to have coverage. Everybody's going to have insurance. Shouldn't this tax disappear? Well, we can all wait for it. There's no anticipation that this tax is going to go away. Only about $1 billion of that is actually used for its purposes that it's meant to. It's really hard for the state to balance a budget today. I can't imagine $3 billion disappearing overnight just because of Obamacare. So this is sort of the world we live in. We have all of these new taxes, we have all of these new responsibilities, and then we have a bunch of add-on new things that we have to cover in health insurance. So we can go to the next slide. These are employee notifications, things that you would have to do. This is not particularly exciting, but most employers, the thing that I would pay attention to is October 1st, 2013, a notice in writing. There's templates out there at the Department of Labor's website that would tell you what you need to supply to your employees to tell them about the exchange. It's just a template. You're going to end up copying it. What I've been telling people is just sort of keep it in the back of your mind. Pay attention to it, at the end of the summer, because the template is changing. There are things that are sort of in flux, to say the very least. One of the things is, your COBRA notifications, which you all are responsible for anyway now. COBRA is another one of those federal laws that should really be disappearing under the ACA, because there's no reason when we have health insurance portability under the exchanges that we would need COBRA. It doesn't even make sense. It was meant to protect what the ACA is, protect people from what the ACA is already solving. COBRA, though, gives the federal government a pretty good opportunity to look at your books, so I wouldn't bet on it disappearing tomorrow. But anyway, stay on top of that stuff. Check out DOL's website. You can check out both the states and the federal government. And there's a lot of good information on all of this stuff on the IRS's frequently asked questions, because really the IRS is sort of the oversight group on the federal level. And I know I'm jumping around. I'm just trying to get out as much stuff as I can in my limited time. So large employers, I'm sorry. I think everybody's familiar with the fact that if you have 50 or more employees, wow, that you're responsible for covering them for health care. Or you pay a fine. And we could certainly go through this really quickly, but all the information's here. Michelle's actually going to send this out to the email list, so you can sort of have this stuff. So I'm not going to belabor the points. But basically, if you have more than 50 employees, you're going to have to pay for insurance, or you're going to pay a penalty. There are things that are important to remember is the affordability test. The affordability test means that the insurance that you offer to your employees has to cost less than 9.5% of their take home. So it's really 9.5% of household income, but the IRS has determined that there's no way for an employer to know that. So you're going with the individual employee, and it's being based on a single plan for just that one employee. So if you offer family coverage, but that's more than the 9.5%, that's okay, as long as the individual coverage is 9.5%. leads us to an interesting little side note. And the side note is that the federal government made this determination to base it on the individual plan, the 9.5, the affordability test. And that's great. It's great for employers, and it was the right thing to do. However, there's a large group of people out there, the dependents of these employees, that are now in a really weird little, warped zone where everybody else in the world can go on the individual exchange and get subsidies if they make, up to 400% of the poverty level. But these people cannot get those subsidies because their spouse, parent, etc., has affordable care given by their employer. It's early morning. Yes.
Is it including part-time workers?
Part-time, no.
Work full-time to get
Work full-time, but full-time under the ACA, thank you for the question, because I am just running. Full-time under the ACA is 30 hours. So your traditional full-time employee of 37 and a half or 40 hours or 35, depending on your business model, they are not, they are full-time, but so are those that work 30 hours. And it all is based on your 2013 numbers, not your 2014 numbers. So it's something to be thinking about today. There's a lot of companies right now that are sort of shifting their hours. They're making their part-time employees be something up to like 28 hours, and their full-time employees are 35 hours. Very distinguished roles, and they're moving them into those roles today, which leads to another whole host of questions about COBRA, which we'll cover some other day. Yes, ma'am?
How does this affect New York State programs like Child Health Plus and Healthy New York?
Healthy New York is going to disappear. Child Health Plus is not absolutely disappearing in the coming year. Child Health Plus, I believe, will still be available. Healthy New York is being phased out because it's really not necessary. The reality with Healthy New York is that it was a lesser plan. It was very good, don't get me wrong. It was a very good way for small employers to offer health insurance. But the range of coverage of Healthy New York was significantly less than that of some of the plans that will be available on the exchange with subsidies. So at the end of the day, it became pointless to force health insurers to write these plans. So you're going to be able to get better coverage, in fact, for probably less money, or like-kind money, I should probably say. Is that answer?
Child Health Plus.
Child Health Plus is one of those things that falls under like the CHIP plans on the federal side. That is not actually going away right now. I think that there's going to be modifications to it. I'm not 100% sure of all the changes, but I believe that will continue to exist for the time being. And I'm trying to remember exactly how that rollout works, but to be honest with you, I'd be making it up right now because it's just not clicking. There were some modifications to it, but that program is still there. But the reality is that all of the people that were sort of depending on these programs should arguably be able to get coverage on the exchanges that would be affordable in the and the numbers have changed. Your Medicaid eligibility has changed. It's gone up to 140% of the poverty level, so more people are actually going to be eligible for that weren't before. And your subsidy levels on the exchange go up to 400% of the poverty level, which is an enormous amount of money, actually. It's like $90,000 income for a family of four are still going to be eligible for some subsidies under the individual exchange in 2014. I mean, that's in upstate New York. That's not small money. In New York City, you're pretty much poor. But where I come from, I didn't have any friends whose family made anywhere near that, to be totally honest with you. So anyway, I'll go back to this for a moment. We can go to the next slide. So what you really need to do is figure out how big your business is, because you might think that you don't have 50 full-time employees, but because you also have to count in your count the hours worked by part-time employees, and it becomes known as the full-time equivalency test, you have to run the test to make sure that you're not above 50, to make sure that you're not mandated at above 50. So I actually have on the next slide, which once again we'll send out. I'm not going to go through the math here because I can't even count. But this is essentially how you go through the test. It's 4 steps. You figure out how many employees you have and whether or not you'll be responsible for the mandated employer. So most of you are probably not going to be mandated. I mean, you're small businesses, you're not going to be mandated to have insurance or to provide insurance. But that being said, there's a host of reasons why you would. And we can go to the next thing. So there's no mandate on the small employer to provide health insurance. There are tax credits available if you purchase from the exchange. They are for businesses that are under 25 employees. There's all sorts of income requirements, etc. What I found anecdotally from talking all over the state on the subject and speaking to people endlessly about it is that you go through 3 days of calculations to get like a $1,300 tax credit, which essentially is offset from your, what you're writing off anyway. Another thing to mention for the large businesses, incidentally, is the penalties that you would incur by not paying insurance are not tax deductible. So your health insurance is of course tax deductible, but the penalties wouldn't be. So when you're doing calculations, these are things to keep in mind. One of the things I would also say, in case I don't get to it because I have but a few minutes, is that when you're making these determinations about the mandates and about whether you are mandated, or even like whether or not you should or should not provide health insurance if you're a small business, I would say always check with your attorneys and always check with your tax professionals, because at the end of the day, these are legal questions. Some of them, the mandate questions, are legal questions, and whether or not you should probably provide have a lot to do with the taxes involved. So I just wanted to throw that out there. We get a lot of calls. I get a lot of calls from businesses saying, well, what does this mean? And what does this mean for me? And what should I do? And I sort of give them broad strokes. I am an attorney, but I'm not their attorney. So I never want to give a definitive answer like that. So you sort of give broad strokes if this is what we're talking about. But if you have real sincere questions about that, pick up the phone, call your lawyer. It's worth the question. It's worth the billable hour. It's always worth the billable hour. The next page talks about the New York Health Exchange, which I sort of spoke about. That's the website to the exchange. It's a pretty not great website at this point. I'm hoping it gets a little bit better. The premium tax credit, which I just mentioned, is only available on the shop. The thing I'll say about the exchange, the exchange is being developed by the state of New York under an executive order through the auspices of the Department of Health. Its executive director is a woman named Donna Frescatore. Donna is a true professional. She comes out of the New York State Medicaid office. She really knows what she's doing. She really understands, sort of health programs. But what's interesting is that they put it under the Department of Health rather than under DFS, which is really the insurance agency. But they work together, and they're real professionals, and they've got a huge job, a huge and painful, horrible job. They have to have all this done by October. I don't know whether they're going to get there. I mean, they seem to think that they're going to. They've got an RFP out for about 800 employees for call centers. They're hiring as we speak. But, I'm up here and I'm doing a lot of critiquing, and I just don't, this is not because New York State does not have great professionals who are really out there working their butts off to try to make this work. This is just an amazingly insurmountable task that was, thrown over by the federal government, which they're undertaking and trying to get there. The next page has sort of some dates to take a look at that we mentioned before. October 1st, open enrollment begins for the January 1st, 2014 coverage. And then the other thing to mention is that on January 1st, 2015, the exchanges have to be self-reliant. They have to make money for themselves. They have to be able to stand alone. There'll be no more federal money to run them. So that really leads to the question of how the hell is this going to happen, pardon my language, because it's really a big question, because we don't know if anyone's even going to show up in the shop exchanges. The individual exchanges, you're definitely going to have people show up because of the subsidies, but we don't know if anyone's going to show up in the shop exchanges. So it leads to other questions like, what are we going to do in 2015? Are we going to merge markets? Are we going to take the small group and the individual market and make it one? Because the health insurance, community really, it's really scary, because while it might continue to drive individual premiums down, small businesses are going to see their premiums continue to rise, because once again you're going to be more burden shifting, and so that's really like one of the things that I'm going to be focusing on for the next long time, year and a half, is sort of where we're going, and how to make sure that we can prevent the worst of it from happening. So we could skip the provider dates. Essential health benefits, I'm not going to go through the list, but this is what the parameters of a health insurance plan are according to the ACA. It has to cover all of these things. There are 3 different things on this list that our plans did not cover in the state of New York. You can go to the next page. So we had to pick a benchmark plan. So back in last October, we picked the Oxford EPO. The Oxford EPO lacked pediatric dental, vision, habilitative services, mental health, subsidy parity. In order to get most plans up to in order to get the Oxford plan up to the standards of the ACA, premiums for that plan would have to go up about 2 to 2.5%. Now, if you had a richer plan than the Oxford EPO, if you had more benefits than the Oxford EPO, then your premium increase based on the ACA's essential health benefits would not be as severe. If you had a less rich plan than the Oxford EPO, which a lot of people in the state had a less rich plan, then your premium is going to go up that much more than 2%. To get us to the essential health benefits. So we're talking about probably an average increase of 3.5% on your premium, plus the 2% I talked about earlier is a 5.5% increase on premium, and that really doesn't jive increase in premium that we talked about on the slide towards the beginning of the presentation. That being said, there's different ways to deal with the expense and the increase, and one of those is the differences in actuarial values of the plans that you can buy. So if you go to the next slide, plans are going to be available in these different. I have 3 metals there, but there's really 4: bronze, silver, gold, and platinum. If you ask me, they're really the same plan. They're just a different actuarial value. So you're either paying up front in a premium. And less in your copays, or you're paying less upfront in a premium and more in your copays. But it really does matter as an employer. What you want to pay up front, what you want to get your employee to pay. So it's something to pay attention to. What's going to be available on the shops for an employer? It's still sort of unknown. We don't know what full participation is going to look like on the exchanges. And if we go to the next page, and this is really the stuff.
Sorry.
Yes.
I thought on those bronze and
Yep.
those coverages were like, if I needed eye care, I would go into that brand, the bronze, the silver, and the gold, or
No.
brands of what you need.
Not necessarily. That's not actually. There's a little bit of truth to that, but the more general principle is, if you got, you get Plan X from Company Y. Your gold plan is going to be that your premium is $500 a month. I'm going to throw it out there. Your copays are going to be really nominal, $10 for this and whatever. Bronze would probably be the same coverages. You'll probably be paying $350 a month. Your copays would be $60. That's really, when you talk about actuarial value, it's just they're like the same. They're the same risk level for the company. It's just how you're paying it. So the benefits. And I didn't want to get into too much of the minutia like pediatric dental, which could be a standalone insurance rider, and things like vision, which will also still be variable because those will be riders. There is some truth to what you're saying, but basically what those metal tiers mean is how much you're paying up front and behind. You're going to have choices of a host of plans at a host of metal levels, and not every plan, incidentally, is going to have every metal level. I'm not going to get into all that detail today. The reason for that is, if you've got like a really good plan, you don't want to be like or a plan that, let's say, very rich in benefit but would be not particularly lucrative to the insurance company. If they are the cheapest, bronze plan available, they're going to get swamped. Everyone's going to go to them, and they're going to go out of business because they're not going to be able to make a living. So that's really what those actuarial values are about. Before I run out of time, I do want to go over the choices for small business because there's a host of them. So you can utilize direct purchase, which almost nobody does in the state of New York. You can utilize your broker or chamber. Some chambers sell insurance, others don't. About 88% of the small group, insurance market in the state of New York is purchased through brokers. We don't anticipate a huge change. Brokers tend to be the ones that really kind of know the products best. I'm not saying run out and have to use a broker, but one of these slides will say it. Actually, the next 2 slides will say it. But if it ain't broke, why fix it? Brokers will be able to purchase you insurance on the exchange or off the exchange if they get themselves certified on the exchange. The products that are available on the exchange should by and large be available off the exchange also. So there's not necessarily a gigantic incentive to do business on the exchange. If you want to take advantage of some of the tax credits, then certainly that's available. So you can also go directly to the shop and go. It's going to be an online, like they say, like Travelocity. But on Travelocity, you don't have to spend 2.5 hours putting your tombstone information down. And when it comes to subsidies and stuff, it's going to have to all go through Social Security, because your Social Security number and through the IRS to see what your incomes are and your eligibility levels. So in any event, the takeaway from here is this is one of the positives probably for small business. You have a lot of shopping options. Whether you want to use them or not is something else. And I do anticipate most people will just buy through their brokers like they have. Choices for small, the next one. So if you go on to the exchange, and there's also private exchanges, incidentally, not just the public exchange. There are private exchanges kind of jumping up all over the place. You'll have the ability to buy products, sort of like a whole slew of products, like from a ton of companies, or you could tell your employees they could buy just about anything. One plan, they could buy from any insurer, they could buy any tier level. So you could say as an employer, I'll buy you anything you want, but it's got to be bronze. That way, more of the copay falls on the employee rather than the employer. So you do have like these options, which, we can go to the next slide. When we talk about using producers, 88% of small group coverage in New York is purchased through brokers. Most will continue. And most brokers, we think, or many brokers at least, will be able to buy on the shop. And then if we go to the next page, this is sort of what I was just alluding to. Defined contribution and private exchanges. So you're going to see some private exchanges pop up. I don't know if they're going to pop up in your market. Some brokers are developing them. So I kind of think that we're at a point where we're going to see a shift in how we purchase insurance or how employers purchase insurance. So in the 1950s, when employers started offering health coverage, it was sort of to incentivize. It was a greater incentive to get people to come and work for them. And there are some advantages to the employer too, because you're increasing what you're giving out as compensation, and yet you're getting a tax deduction for that amount. However, we all know that that the cost of health insurance has just gone up tremendously, as the cost of health care has gone up tremendously throughout the state and throughout the whole country. So one of the things that we've gotten so used to is this defined benefit. You as an employer, you go in and you pick, Company X's plan, and it's got this coverage, and all your employees are in it, and that's that. Next year, they go up 17% in cost, and guess what? You're stuck with 17% increase in cost. Because of the exchanges, because of the concept of exchange, we're sort of going to see a shift from defined, that would be the defined benefit. Here's the plan. You have a defined benefit, to a defined contribution. So you as the employer can say, okay, I'm going to put $300 a month towards your health insurance. Here's the exchange. Buy whatever you want. Or buy anything that's in this tier. Or buy anything that, any company or anything under Blue Cross. Or, you have that freedom. You don't have to make the choice of what your employee buys anymore. It's not a defined benefit any longer. You're just defining what the contribution is. The other beautiful thing to that is if next year healthcare costs go up another 8%, but your business has not grown 10% to cover the 8% increase in that, you can say, okay, we're doing the $300 a month, there's our defined contribution. Shop wisely on the shop. So you're not necessarily married to the same increases in the expense of healthcare under a defined contribution. This is not me necessarily advocating that you all take that route. I'm just saying that this is one of the changes I foresee going on in healthcare. Mind you, the never-ending shift in cost. Someone's always going to be having to eat this. So, at some point, if you're offering too poor of a benefit to your employees, they're going to take notice and they're going to eventually go elsewhere. But it is going to be a significant shift in how we do things, and it puts a little bit more responsibility in the hands of the employee to sort of pay attention to their health care costs. Not unlike high deductible plans, which really we're showing evidence of working and doing that too. So I think that was that. So then there's the option, of course, of dropping coverage, which, it has its benefits, obviously. Certainly here all over the state, people saying that they're going to do it. But I think that goes back to the beginning when I'm talking about acting rationally, acting strategically, rather than acting emotionally. I had one employer call me one day, this was quite a while ago, it was sort of after the Supreme Court made their decision last summer. And he said, well, they voted for him, they can have it, and that's it. Totally his prerogative, but I don't know that that's necessarily what good business is. I mean, there's too many reasons to insure employees. I just think that then there's a lot of options to try to keep it a little bit more affordable, even as premiums are bound to go up. So it is something that companies definitely have to think about. As I said, you're basing a lot of your stuff on what's going on in 2013, who your employees are in 2013, the look-back period, the amount of employees, the amount of time that they work. We can go to the next one. Things to consider moving forward. Of course, the advantages of covering your employee are the tax advantages. I mean, really, at the end of the day, it is a cheaper way to compensate an employee for a whole dollar amount. The downsides are, of course, the ever-increasing costs. This is really what I do every single day, is fight the increases of costs on health insurance. The endless mandates that are put on. So one thing I think worth noting, the good news is, because I'm not delivering a ton of good news, I recognize that. One of the really things I can tell you that's good news is New York was overburdened by health insurance mandates for so long, and so many, we have like 50 of them, that our insurance was so expensive already that the ACA is not going to lead to an outrageous increase in your premiums. 5%, 6%, 7%, 8%, 9%, 10%. They're horrible sounding, don't get me wrong. But if you were in Alabama, you'd be looking at 157%. Because they just weren't mandated to cover all these things before. The other good news that I can tell you is that anything that doesn't fit into that Oxford EPO, our chosen essential health benefits plan in the state of New York, anything that's not already covered by that the state of New York then mandates, the state of New York has to pick up the tab for the subsidies of all of those people who are being insured under that for those products. So that suddenly comes out of the state budget, and that means that legislators think twice about passing more mandates. So this session, they really only passed one. I mean, it depends on how you categorize a mandate. I'm going to be a little less liberal on that categorization. They passed one mandate, which will have a minor cost. So it's actually made my job on that end a little bit easier. The bad news is they will keep doing it on workers' comp because employers pay that 100%. So, the good times keep rolling for me when you have these issues. But these are the things to sort of, walk away with, is that, it's not absolute peachy keen for sure. It's also not absolutely the end of the world. And you need to take some really, really big looks at your business, how you're doing business now in 2013, how many employees, what you want to do going forward. And when you're making decisions, please just contact your professionals, be them tax or legal, and make sure that you're doing the things the right way. The last thing you want to know, is find out in the middle of 2014 that you made a mistake along the way. One more thing, and this is a question I always get, so I'll answer it now. If you're already enrolled in a healthcare plan and your re-enrollment date is, I don't know, July or something, or let's say June for that minute, or whatever it is. So you're going to re-up this month. And so you're going to start January of 2014, under a 2013 plan. So, people are like, well, what happens on January 1st? Are we going to be responsible for all this stuff? You're not responsible for all of the ACA stuff until your re-enrollment post-January of 2014. So the one caveat to that, of course, is if you are mandated to have coverage and you have an employee that actually does not have affordable coverage and goes and gets a subsidy on the individual exchange, you're supposed to not be responsible for the penalty, up until your re-enrollment period. However, I can't imagine that the IRS is going to get their act together in time to make sure that you don't get penalized. So it's something to keep in mind in the back of your mind. You may get this penalty, but I think that you'll have a presumptive defense that you weren't responsible for giving them affordable insurance until your re-enrollment period. So I know that was a little bit confusing, but that's a question that people always have. Yes?
On the 90-10, 80-20 on the different metal plans,
Yeah.
Is there a maximum out of pocket?
There is a maximum amount of pocket, you mean for the employee?
Yeah, if you rack up big
If you're a
medical
small business and
bills,
you're,
the employee, like the insured individual.
but is it a small business?
Small business, yeah.
There's no mandate. You don't have to do anything. You don't have to give them insurance. So
But if they have insurance, say I buy the platinum plan.
there's no anything. You're not required to give them anything. So anything you give them is fine. Small business is not mandated to provide insurance for their employees. So there is no minimum maximum of anything. You could give them $1, you could give them $0, you could give them everything.
No, I'm talking about from the insured side, like medical bill side.
Oh yeah, no, there are no. They're actually in here somewhere. I'd have to look them up. It's like, give me 2 seconds.
Because I'm on a $3,000 deductible with a $5,000 out of pocket. Is it going to look like that?
It can. It's a little more than that, I think. I just need to find it. I just don't remember off the. 2013, $62.50 for a single. $12,500 for a family. That would be your premiums. So the out-of-pocket deductible, I not off the top of my head, I don't remember on the exchange. But I think
But
that
they're in there. There are-
I believe there are some limitations. Yeah.
We just let them know that some companies are trying to break into common ownership. Just talk about that.
Oh, okay, so common ownership, that's for large businesses, or that's for employers of over 50. If you have common ownership, you're going to count all of those employees together. And common ownership will follow the same rules that the IRS uses for tax purposes, for 401k purposes, and things like that. So you basically, a good prime example would be a guy that owns like 5 Dunkin' Donuts. And each Dunkin' Donuts only has 12 or 13 or 15 employees, but all told, there's 75 employees. Going to be responsible for insurance for all of them. And then there's a further breakdown. So if company, A, Dunkin' Donuts 1 has insurance for everybody, and 2 and 3 don't, you're going to be paying the penalty on 2 and 3, but not on 1. So there is some complexities involved in there, but generally speaking, if you have any common ownership businesses that would be considered common ownership under general IRS principles, you're going to be responsible for that whole grouping of employees when you're counting up to 50 to see if you're a large employer. Did that cover that?
Yeah.
Okay. I could take one more, and then I really got to run, and I apologize.
I just wondered if the Business Council were doing anything to help with the defunding and repeal of the law.
Well, so the Business Council of the State of New York is a New York lobbying organization. I'm a registered lobbyist with the state of New York, not with the federal government. I lobby the state legislature and the governor, etc. The repeal of the law is a federal issue. And quite frankly, I think that this is me speaking and not the Business Council, but I think that it's a real uphill battle to the point of, perhaps moot. It's not happening. And, it would be inappropriate for the Business Council to be too terribly involved. I mean, what's important to me is that you walk away from here knowing what you're facing, knowing that, wow, this health insurance tax, for instance, which is going to be $400 per premium, that's a federal tax. Leave here and call your congressman and say, this is outrageous. This should be changed by all means. But that's not our focus because, we're a state lobbying organization. So what we're trying to do is mitigate the pain for New Yorkers, which is, it's quite a charge. There are certainly organizations doing it. I think you're going to see every Republican running on that platform in the next congressional elections. But there's not much that we're doing on that level, and we're really concerning ourselves with sort of the New York exchanges. It's not that I've taken no action on the federal level, but it's not sort of our bailiwick. So, anyway, I apologize for having to run so quickly. I usually like to stay and take questions for as long as I can, but I got to get back to Albany. Michelle is going to email out, I think that everybody gave her their business cards. She is going to email out the PowerPoint. Perhaps I might enhance it a little with a couple other slides because then you can look at it. If you have questions, you can certainly reach out. And I'm not doing a shill for membership, but one of the things I think it is important to note is, the more businesses that are members of organizations like your local chambers and the Business Council, the more voice that we have. It's easy to get forgotten in the mix because we're talking about, millions of people who are getting health insurance, but nobody's paying attention to who's paying for it. And it's everybody in this room. So anyway, thanks to you all. Thanks for your time and your attention.